Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development and another episode of Sales and Cigars. Today our guest is Harry Spaight, who's in the sales improvement, sales coaching space. He's written an interesting book called Selling with Dignity. We get into his story about doing mission work, his journey to sales. It's got a couple of interesting little spins to it, but it's not uncommon story where you struggle at the beginning. You're not sure why you took the job, and then you have success, and then you get promoted to sales leadership roles. So it's a great story. We talk about selling with dignity and creating mastermind groups, and it's just a great conversation. So if you're an entrepreneur or salesperson, there's something in this for everybody. So go grab a cigar, grab a cocktail, and strap in for another fun episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So Harry, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule on a Friday afternoon to jump on the podcast with me. Thank you very much.
Hey, Walter, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. How's life in beautiful Michigan?
It's a little warmer than it normally is. We've had rain for like 7 days in a row. We'd have 2 feet of snow if it was cold. Now we just have mud and gray skies and dirty streets.
That sounds lovely.
Which is probably a far cry from what you have down in Florida.
Yeah, we're looking at blue sky and green grass, and the pool is a little chilly. I don't think I'll be jumping in anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay, you're not making friends, dude. But I did the same thing when I was in Florida in November. I was talking to my friends up here, and they didn't appreciate my humor. So,
well, yeah, it was we had temperatures in the 20s, which is very unusual for us. And I like to ride my bike and work up a little sweat occasionally. So I came home from the bike ride and I said, I'm going to do it. And I jumped into the pool because I've heard these things about, Tony Robbins or somebody going to these saunas and then 47-degree ice baths and so forth. I said, the pool can't be 47.
No.
But I'm telling you, I just thought, I said, there's no way this is going to bother me. But man, I was sucking. It was a miracle I didn't suck water in when I was underneath the water. But yeah,
gave you a little shot of adrenaline, though, right? Woke you up.
Yeah. I was pumped. I could go back on the bike again. But yeah, it was fun.
What Tony doesn't tell you is that sometimes that can cause a cardiac arrest if you do it too fast. So
okay, all right. Well, I'm glad I survived it.
Yeah, awesome. Me too. So let's talk a little bit about your journey. It's always interesting for somebody in the sales development, sales improvement space to talk about how they got into sales and how they got into doing what you're doing now. Don't go back to kindergarten, but can you kind of go back a little bit on your story?
Yes, I can go back to the mid-90s. Is that reasonable enough for you?
I'm with you.
Okay, so in the mid-90s, my wife and I were living in the Dominican Republic, and we were doing mission work. Okay. We had traveled to places like St. Petersburg, Russia, and chipped away at the Berlin Wall. So we were, young and adventurous. And then she said something like, "Are we ever going to have a family?" I went, what? So I took my mission experience and thought, what could I do to earn a living? And I thought about sales. So to support my mission work, I had a small janitorial business. Yep. So I cleaned toilets, offices, banks, you name it, washed windows. But I didn't want to go back to doing that. So
Why?
I had a resume. What's that? Why?
Why?
Yeah, because I just felt like that was beneath me a little bit. I've done it long enough. And I said, can I do something in the corporate arena? Because I've never done it. Can I do something and be successful? So I created a little resume. It had missionary and it had a janitorial business. And I was looking for a sales job. And I got the questions like, what kind of quotas are you familiar with? It was a joke, right?
Sure.
So finally someone felt sorry enough for me, and I got a job selling office technology, color printers, And, I just started applying what I've learned in the mission field, which is really all servant related. Like you've heard of servant leadership. I was
Sure.
doing servant selling. And, it took me a little bit to figure all that out. But after a number of months, I started to sell and built up a career. And that led to sales leadership, which often is the case. Take a top performer and you put them into sales leadership, and then they suck for a while,
Yep.
which I did.
We all have.
But yeah, you figure it out and read a lot. And, I listened to a lot of CDs and stuff and built a career over the next 20 plus years or so.
So it's always interesting, low bar to get into sales. Somebody will give you a shot. They don't usually give you a lot of help. And office technology, copiers, fax machines, all that stuff. It's sort of like there's a yellow pages or there's a reverse directory. Here's what you're going to sell. Do a demo, right? They don't help you much. But if you have success, they think you must know what you're doing. So, and I don't know how to manage these other salespeople. So can you go manage those guys for me? And your journey is, I get it.
Yeah.
I got put into a sales management role the first time, and I've told this story a couple of times on this podcast. But it was Christmas party, had a great year. Got all the awards and stuff. And the owners after the dinner, they came over to me and said, "Hey, can we see you at the bar?" And I okay. I looked at my wife. I'm like, "Get your coat. This could be bad. This could be good. Just be ready." Right. So she sees us laughing over there and shaking hands and stuff. So they offered me the sales director role.
Mm-hmm.
And I was all excited, right? We get in the car on the way home, and I tell her about it. And she's like, "Have you ever managed anybody before? Have you ever managed any salespeople?" And I'm like, "No. What does that have to do with anything?" And so I really started, sort of like what you said. You want to win, you want to compete, so you got to go learn, because the two guys that offered me the job didn't know how to do it. So you go do the work, right? So you're the exception to the rule. You went and did the work to learn how to be a better leader, and apply all the other things that you've learned in your experience. So talk to me about missionary work. And I think sales is about helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And serving people is another kind of way to say that. Listening, is that important in the missionary work? I've never done missionary work, so I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's like really that was the number one takeaway in the mission field is listening, because people really, they all have stories to tell. I know that you're a big fan of storytelling, and everyone's got their story, and this is how you gain trust, is by listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in sales, when people ask me, well, what's a quick tip you could give me about sales? I always say, be a better listener. It's, even people will say, who've been in sales forever, will say things like, selling is different than listening.
Mm-hmm.
And selling incorporates listening. You cannot, in my opinion, sell successfully and build trust by speaking. You do that by listening. And when
100%.
people, right? So, I mean, that's kind of the big thing that I've learned. And I've always, around the same time I was learning sales, I was reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book.
Great book. And in it, I learned how to listen, to be a better listener, because listening to understand versus listening to respond are 2 completely different things. Right.
Yeah, it's like watching the sideline reporter at a football game, right? Where they stick the mic in the coach's face, and then all they're doing is waiting for him to be done talking so they can ask the next question and go.
Right.
That's what most salespeople do. And you have to really be curious, I think, to when you're listening to somebody, to ask more questions. And if they're questions that come from curiosity, they seem authentic, and they are authentic, right? Because if you're not curious, it's hard to fake it. But if you're really listening to somebody, why did you do it that way? Or how does that work? Or how long you've been doing it that way? Those to me are it becomes natural, but it all starts, like you say, from listening. Um, what else is applicable from mission work to sales?
Well, one of the things, Walter, when I was struggling early on, I didn't understand, I didn't have any business acumen at all. I mean, I didn't know really how offices worked. I didn't know any kind of workflow or process. And I was given the task to sell these high end color printers that started at $20,000 and went up to close to six figures. And I remember being working with this ad agency, and I knew nothing about the workflow. I knew nothing about digital files, computer programs. I had to learn all of this in a relatively short time because they expected me to sell. And I remember, as I was failing, putting up a lot of zeros, I said, this isn't working, me stressing out. I know I can serve people. If I just become the best customer service minded person in sales, I could probably do okay. And I just let go and just started serving people. And that's really, when you think about that, it's like the servant leadership, it's the same in sales. You do things for other people, you put them over you, you listen first. And if you don't have a product that makes sense, you say, I'd love to sell something to you, but this isn't for you. And that just gained so much trust with people that,
Yep.
you get repeat business that way. You may not get it the first time, but then you get it afterwards, and then it's repetitive.
Well, those people see that you're you're credible, that you're trustworthy, and it, it but it has to be authentic, right? So I would imagine if you're doing mission work and you're trying to help people in one capacity or the other, if you're not doing it for the right reasons, they're going to see through that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly a parallel to sales, where you want to be able to. You can't help somebody unless you understand what their situation is, and you can't help them see if your product is a fit if it isn't.
Right. Yeah. And I think the really one of the fun things I've learned is to act like you don't need the sale.
Right.
You want the sale. And I know I read that somewhere. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. But there's that whole thinking is like, act like you don't need the sale and just listen, be calm, and say things like, well, this may not be for you, but are you open to hear what one of your competitors did in an
Right.
area, like, going through similar things? And then, they say, sure. And then you're having this conversation and you say, I don't know, has that ever happened here? And you're just taking, it's like you're just taking all the pressure off when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where I became, I think, very successful, because I wasn't eager. And in the mission field, you cannot be eager, because, like you said, people see through all of that stuff. You want to be excited, you want, etc. But when you're overly eager, then they sense the pressure is coming. And it's more about you because you're eager than it is for your quote unquote customer. And I'd say that when I look at salespeople today, and they'll say things like, when they finish someone's sentences, for instance,
Yeah.
they'll say, well, I'm just connecting with them and I know where they're going. And having done that, right? Because I've finished people's sentences, but then I reflect and say, is that really doing them a service?
It's annoying them usually.
It's annoying, right? You might think, well, you're connecting, but they're saying possibly this person doesn't let me finish.
Right.
And that's really not a great trait.
It's a connection, but it's not a positive one.
Right.
And they don't. I don't think that they do it on purpose um, to be manipulative, but they literally think that this is being helpful, and that type of thing is being helpful, and it's not. Um, I was taught the same thing 30 years ago, where I'm not sure this is a good fit for you, and and then just to pause and let somebody, maybe they agree, maybe they don't, and they try to help you understand why they think it is a good idea, right? Then that becomes very easy to walk that path, because they're helping you understand what they understand, and then you can fill in blanks. Or but I've had people like, I want X, and I'm like, I really don't think that's the right move for you, right? And I'm kind of a sarcastic guy. I remember a situation where the guy's like, I want this thing here, I want it here. I'm like, I can do that, but man, I'm going to have to charge you 3 times what that should cost, because you're going to be upset. Why would I be upset if you give you what I asked for? I'm like, because it's not going to work. You're going to be unhappy, and you're going to blame me. And I said, that thing that you want should cost 12 grand. But what you should do is put something over here that costs 5. He's, why should I do that? And I'm like, because that's where all the people are. It was a sign. You got 40,000 eyeballs going by out here. Nobody sees this side but you when you pull in your car and park in the morning. So this is a waste of money. Over there, you just talked yourself out of 6 or 7 grand. I'm like, nope. I talked myself into a customer who's going to be happy, and he's going to go out and tell everybody else. And we ended up doing business, and we did it the way we should have. And he ended up being a huge fan, telling people about, this crazy guy just talked himself out of money because it was the right thing to do. And I'm sorry, I just don't know any other way to do it, which I think is another parallel to mission work, right? You should be doing it the right thing for the right reasons for the people to help them.
Yeah. And, when you have principles, you're going to try to do the right thing. And, there are times, again, I've not been a saint the whole time in sales, right? I've, bent to the pressure of hitting numbers for a Fortune 500 company. You push the envelope. You don't break the law, but you break the rules sometimes.
You bend them. You can bend them.
Right? Yeah. And so, but I've learned that when it's with a customer, it's going to come back. And so what's the point?
Right.
Do the right thing, and that also comes back. But when you do the stuff that's borderline, that's not healthy. It's not good for anybody.
No, it's not, and especially not good for your credibility and your ability to build trust. And because even 30 years ago, it was a small world, and the world's gotten smaller. So you can trash your reputation in minutes, by doing or saying the wrong thing these days. And I think that's a good way to look at it, is having some principle, to stick around, stick to, and have that as a North Star to work off of.
Totally.
So you wrote the book. Let's talk a little bit about that, the reason for that, because writing a book isn't always about making money. It's about other things. Actually, it's pretty hard to make money in that.
Exactly. Yes. It's a big expense.
Yeah. Marketing expense, effectively.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's good to just get it out and share it with people, to have that out in the universe. So what was I think I know the answer, but can we talk about your purpose for that, and what you were really trying to do? Same thing?
Helping? Yeah, totally. The book was written for people who I felt were like me in sales, that were not really, feeling like they're a part of anything, right? Because I was not competitive. And even as a sales leader, when I hear things like you got to drive competition with your players, I'd say, I'm not that guy. I'm all about team and working together. So as a person I didn't have to be number one. I never wore a Rolex watch. I never really drove a fast car. So none of that stuff appealed to me. Money appealed to me, but not tons of money. Okay. So, cause I wanted to live a purposeful life. So I felt like I succeeded in sales, and I know there are people out there like me that are quiet, that don't need to be in first place. They don't need to be the top dog. They want to sell. They want to earn a living. Maybe they're in a small business. And this is where I feel like is the home run for me, is entrepreneurs that are shy, that are good with their clients, but they just struggle and making a call or sending that follow-up email asking, can we get back together? Can we re-engage? And just having those conversations, because they don't know how to do that stuff. And I can just bring this in very easily to help people. And I said, I'm going to write a book for those people, and that will be my mark. And of course, set an example for my kids and all that stuff. But money was never. A friend of mine, after I was almost finished with the book, he says, Harry, whatever you do, make sure that you have some kind of course or program. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I literally knew nothing about that. And then I started looking up courses and programs. I said, I'm too far in, but I ended up at least organizing the chapters in a way that made sense. That was logical, right? So, sure. Yeah.
But to write a book is effort. It's a process. It's a challenge, but it makes it easier to have a purpose to help somebody. And you were very dialed into a group of people that actually could use some help, because they would also struggle to ask for help too, I would imagine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, I'm
because
talking
of the kindness, right? That would be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I was just speaking to a group of speakers, and the person that was speaking for the group of speakers said her number one challenge is sales. And she says, is anyone with me? And the whole room was raising their hands. Sales is everywhere. You don't just become a speaker because you're great at it. You have to sell yourself. You don't just become, a successful IT company or a successful, you name the business, fill in the blank, because you're really good at something. You have to actually tell others and get people to buy into you and have, be able to tell stories like you mentioned, which is all part of selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being able to position it right, message it well, in a way that relates. And it's not pitching.
It's not pitching. Oh, please. Yeah, please. No pitching allowed.
Right. I mean, unless you're in front of a venture capitalist or private equity person where that's the purpose of, but then you got 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't make your case in 30 seconds, they shut down. And because we just immediately, our brain goes to that, that reptilian brain goes to like fear, like, oh crap, he's going to try to sell me something here. And you start to back away. You can literally see it. If you watch record an interaction, people just kind of slide back, ever so slightly, because they're afraid they're about to be pitched.
Exactly.
And salespeople don't get it. They just don't see it. And
because they're different.
Yeah. Yeah, we are different.
Right. But they think their particular sale is different, or they themselves are different. But in a customer's eyes, we're all the same.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Like the images of the guy with the short sleeve white shirt with the clip-on little tie. Yeah. That still is the image that people pop up when they think sales. They think of that used car sales guy, or the Glenn Ross kind of a situation. and we're constantly, those of us who try to do things from in a different perspective, and those are the people that are trying to help or serve, we're constantly fighting that. Like, we actually have to work hard to not be put in that box.
Exactly.
It's a challenge. So let's talk a little bit about masterminds groups. How do you get people to join your mastermind, and how do you structure that? How do you put that group together? Because there's people here that listen to this podcast that, one of the things that entrepreneurs have or CEOs have is they don't always have that outlet where they can talk to another peer about issues. And there's lots of groups for that, but sometimes there's too much formality. Can you talk a little bit about your structure on mastermind?
Yeah. So the thing is with a mastermind is that you want people to do exactly what you just said. You want everyone to engage, having a conversation, talk about their business challenges in a safe place. And not everyone, is comfortable with doing that. But as you have the conversations, you teach a little bit, and then I like the hot seat concept, which is, whatever you want to call that. You're focused, you're on the spotlight, so that we're going to talk about what your challenges, and then talk about anything. But the real benefit is that you have, I love coaching, but coaching is going to come from, really, a great coach is going to help the person find the answers within themselves.
Right.
Consulting is a lot of what a lot of us do is we consult, even though most people don't get the difference between consulting and coaching. But a real coach is going to work with you to help you find the answers to your challenges and ask you questions until you get, it's like, yeah, this is what I need to do, and this is why. Now, in the mastermind group, you've got the benefit of, sometimes that comes up, but for the most part, you've got people sharing their ideas that help not just the person in the hot seat, so to speak, or the person that's got the focus, but the others also get to hear from that. And Napoleon Hill famously wrote something along the lines that you can accomplish more in 1 year in a mastermind than in a lifetime. And I love working with different people and getting them to open up and to be comfortable and to share what's going on. And, then you have the successes of seeing people try something and, coming back and say, hey, that really worked. And, it's like we're having a place where we're all together, not judging, helping each other. And this is the key, I think, in the mastermind, is Napoleon said, where you're working together, which is it's not like you're just going and just saying, this is all on me and this is my night, and there are other times I'm not going to really be that concerned. It's like you take ownership of being a giver and helping the people in that room as well. And that's not for everybody, right?
No.
Because some people are, yeah.
Yeah, everybody in the room has to be willing to serve in the moment and be engaged to help the other person. The selfishness must go out the window.
Exactly.
Or not even come in the room.
Exactly. Yeah.
And as the facilitator, that becomes a challenge to shut that down when you see that, without making it not a safe place. But that's an interesting. I hadn't heard that thinking from Napoleon Hill before, but being able to, but being in a room with people that were, you call it, maybe you're on the hot seat, but if everybody else is engaged, all those years of experience comes to that person without judgment, without the frustration of I experienced something like that, and let me tell you how I dealt with it. Right, that sort of mentality, rather than this is what you should do. I mean, that becomes just the language becomes part of it, I would imagine. Being in a group, I've been part of groups where the owner of a company I work for took me to his group when there was a section of it where everybody was in the room. It wasn't what you're talking about, but it was like preceding that. And I got to know things about the guy that I worked for that he would never have shared otherwise. I mean, the level of personalness, the I think probably gets, as the group matures, that becomes deeper. Is that fair?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's more trust that's built over time. And if you haven't done it, I would highly suggest experiencing. And you go, typically you can maybe get a visit in with, maybe it's a session and see how it goes. It depends on if someone's just starting a mastermind or it's a group that's got a vacant seat or something along those lines. But you want to be fewer than 10 people. 5 or 6, I think, is ideal. But, because then you're getting a hot seat every 6 or 8 weeks or every 5 or 6 weeks. But too many, you're not getting enough, I feel like, because everyone should get some one-on-one time or one-on with the group time. But that whole spirit, not every group is the same.
Right.
Some are going to be really consulting centric, where they're going to give ideas. I like the mix. Like, look, if someone's struggling with a challenge, then you can bring that up because it's a safe tree.
So
And
the group forms a personality as an entity of itself.
It does. Yeah. And then you're building these incredible relationships that you're putting yourself out there. If you truly are comfortable in being your authentic self, it can be a very powerful thing, because now you're not trying to hide behind I'm really successful, right? Yeah. Where you want to have this veneer of, I don't want anyone to know my deep, dark secret that I am afraid.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm afraid. When you can come back and say, well, this is where my real struggle is. And a lot of times, I mean, in sales, it's like I've had conversations with people that you would never think struggle just to make a call. It's like, how can we help you make one phone call, right? I'm not, it's just getting that first call out. It's like, oh, I could never do that. And true. That's a challenge for people. And so the goal is try to help them. It's not calling them an idiot and saying you're going to fail. It's like, well, how can we make progress? What can we do? Who's got some ideas, right? Who go around the room.
There's a great line from it's really a children's book, but it's basically, I can see what I'm trying to get. I know it's on the other side of this forest, but I can't see it because of the forest. And the companion in the story says, can you see the next step? Can you see how you put your right foot forward? Well, yeah, do that. And, the story goes on, but I mean, that's really the thing. You don't necessarily have to know how you're going to navigate the whole thing. You just got to start and just focus on that one little piece of action you can take.
Absolutely. Very true. And it's just getting over the paralysis of not knowing.
Perfection.
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's the other thing, is like, it's not going to be good enough. I mean, I struggle with that. Yeah, I have to go back and forth with the group, and when I'm on the hot seat, it's like, well, this is one of my challenges, because I know, right? I'm cool with saying it's not going to be good enough, but it's still paralyzing sometimes.
Yeah, everybody's human, and humans all have fears and baggage. And once we recognize that, and we come to terms that it's not just us, every other people have this issue. So I'm normal.
Exactly.
And
It's
then,
so powerful.
but it's just acknowledging that it's that's normal thing to happen. It's totally
Yeah.
normal.
But
So
for some reason, we think that people are living, you know, differently than us. You could never understand, Walter, my insecurities because you're so confident.
yeah,
Right. And, it's like, once you expose an insecurity, it's like, what? Walter? Are you kidding me? This
yeah,
calm, collective guy has doubts at times.
right. Every freaking day. Uh, but and social media has made that worse, right? Because people just post this stuff about how wonderful their life is. They don't post the tragic components. They don't post the stuff that's not pretty. People make a mess, and it's just the way it is, and we got to accept that. I think, and once you accept it, then you can start to deal with it. I don't know. I've been through great stuff in my life and awful stuff, and I you failed, great. What did
Hmm.
you learn?
Right.
And then let's go right. And from a sales call, from a coaching a salesperson, it's like I screwed that call up. Really, what happened? Well, I didn't get the sale. Well, of course you didn't get the sale, but what happened? And then we can start to dissect it. Like first, you made
Hmm.
the call. You dialed the phone, you got in front of him, and okay, it didn't go exactly the way you wanted, but let's figure out why. We can do it again better the next time. And if we just, I don't know,
Yeah.
recognizing that we all have our own challenges.
Hmm.
And when
And
that person's a big shot like you or a couple of my mentors, it makes it easier for other people to say, well, if Harry has that similar challenge, maybe I can do it too, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm one that really, it sounds like you are as well, is that I wear my heart on my sleeve. I let people know the challenges. I'll take the bullet. I'll follow the sword. I'll be the first one to try something just so I can say, look, if I can do it, I know you guys have more skill than I do, right? I know you're better than I am. So let me throw myself out there, and to give it a go.
Nope. Yeah,
Right.
and that's generous. And if when it's generous and authentic, it's pretty powerful for the people you're working with.
Yeah, and
Um,
that really I think came from that whole mission experience, right? Because you're trying to get people to make change that don't necessarily trust you, and you have to do things that you know put yourself out there to some degree. And it's
risky.
it's just one of those things about humanity is that I believe that selling with dignity is living with dignity, and the way we treat others is it's just I don't want to say it's like a kumbaya thing, but it's so much better when we look at it as a whole and make our contribution than it is just say, look, I got to make a paycheck and I don't really care about anyone else.
Right. That
Right.
and there's plenty of people that do that in sales, and there's plenty of people that do that in other walks of life, which
Yeah,
has
absolutely.
similar results. Um,
Absolutely.
uh, uh, we taught our daughter the golden rule, right? That to
Yep.
treat people the way you want to be treated. And I remember one night we were at dinner as a family, and I had a couple of cocktails, and my wife was driving, and we had talked about the golden rule. We talked about treating people the way. So she's like, "Dad, you can't live your life just with that." I'm like, "Well, what else do you need? What else do you need? If you just treat people well, and that's your guide
Hmm.
to get yourself through to navigate life, if that's the thing that you measure, how do you go wrong?" So it was a 10-minute drive home, and she was quite the little persistent young gal. And she went through a ton of scenarios. And I had a couple of cocktails. Um, and I'm like, it applies. She will, speeding through the neighborhood. Well, think about it. Well, but there's a speed limit. But what does that have to do with treating people the way you'd want to be treated? I'm like, well, imagine you have a child would you want somebody driving through the neighborhood fast? If you thought of the neighborhood as a place where there's children, and if your child lived there, how does that not apply? She went through like 10 different things, and she finally got convinced that that was enough. I mean, there's other things, right? I'm sure, right? I don't get into faith and religion, but I think that's a good place to live your life from and sell from, right? Which is kind of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's really how we live our lives. The whole, without getting into that aspect, it's like, I feel like that's what you need to do. I'd rather be around, it's like the Billy Joel thing, right? Laugh with the sinners and cry with the saints. The people that are, willing to serve and recognize that we're flawed and help people, than be with the people that, never make mistakes and are perfect and all that stuff. It's like, I like the challenge of going through the fails in life and learning new things, and I think a lot of us do. And if I can help or you can help, then that gives us a special feeling like we've made a contribution.
Yeah, and that's what drives it. I mean, we all want to make money, but I also want to watch people grow. That's sort of my
yeah. You can make money a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's a great way to look at it. So let me wrap this up with. It's interesting. You said you did your missionary work some of it in the Dominican, which is where this little stick in my fingers came from. Does Harry have a relationship with cigars at any point in his life, past or present?
Yeah, I'd say that when I left the mission field, I moved down to the Washington, D.C. area, and I had my first ever cigar on a golf course. And I went, wow. It's probably a Dominican cigar with a Connecticut wrapper or something. But yeah, so my brother-in-law, who passed in the past couple of years, he's a bit older than I was, but older than I am. I mean, he played golf and always had a cigar. And so the bond, because I never, ever had a cigar until I was, in my 40s, actually. Mm-hmm. And the bond of having a cigar on the occasional walk through the grass with hitting a white ball was just a great experience. I mean, that's all I can say about it. It's just something I really enjoyed, and look back at the times we had together. And so, yeah, that's the experience. So,
yeah, Mark Twain said golf is a good walk spoiled. And that's where I had my first cigar. I was a little younger. But to me, golf and a cigar, you're usually with friends. You're outdoors. Occasional glass of Cabernet or cocktail is involved. What could be better, right? You're with people you care about, you like, and sometimes there's sometimes you have a good round.
Yeah, once in a while, but it's man fire food type thing, man fire golf, right? So,
yeah, my wife tells the story that that summer I developed two bad habits: cigars and golf. Because, and the funny thing is, the guy that I played with, it kind of helped teach me, got me hooked on it. The first time we went out, we didn't have cigars. Second time we went out, he brought cigars because he was giving me 20 strokes a side.
Oh, okay.
And he was still winning, but he needed something to keep himself occupied. So
as you were looking for balls
cigars with them. Yeah. Well, sometimes you couldn't, there was no reason to look. You just dropped another one because they were deep.
Too far deep.
Yeah. So man's got to know his limitations, as Clint would said. So, Harry, this great conversation. I think you help a group of people that they can do the job, but you help give them confidence and hope to be able to do it better, and that they don't need to be that kind of a hard charging douchebag kind of a sales guy to be successful.
Exactly.
So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Is there anything that we need to add? We're going to have your website, getting the book from the website is the best place. What is there anything else we should add to this before we sign off?
Nope, just listen to more Walter Crosby, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is chill, knows his stuff, and it's been a real joy having a conversation with you, man.
Very generous, Harry. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.